Doctor didn't believe me.
After reading several medical horror stories on here, it's no small wonder I hate going for anything medical. I thought I'd like to share my story. My experience is small potatoes compared to the rest. But here goes. Around late March of 2017, my right wrist was feeling particularly sore for several days. I bought a wrist brace and wore it during work because at the time I had a job that required a lot of heavy lifting, upwards of 60 lb. I favored my right wrist, overcompensating by using my left arm hand to bear the brunt of the weight whenever I could. My right wrist eventually healed over the course of a month or so. My self-diagnosis was that it was tendinitis. Unfortunately, the exertion on my left for the prolonged period caused severe tendinitis in my left wrist. In early May, I noticed the first symptoms. Again, I bought a wrist brace and lessened the load. Unlike with my right, my left was not improving. It worsened to the point that I had very limited movement of my wrist. Any accidental pressure or bumping of two of the tendons in my wrist, the ones leading up the thumb, resulted in terrible pain. By mid-July, knowing that my wrist should not still be in so much pain, I finally went to urgent care. The doctor examined my wrist and sent me on my way with a low-grade prescription painkiller. I took most of that medication over the course of the next 2 weeks, and it did nothing. Finding that the treatment I was given had been useless, I didn't feel confident seeking further treatment. Even though my wrist was in pain, this was mostly typical if I moved, bent my wrist, or accidentally bumped it. For nearly 3 more months, I dealt with it. By October, my wrist had gradually worsened that it was constantly sore, at best, or leaving me in excruciating pain with tears rolling down my face and unable to use my left hand for up to an hour. In fact, my wrist felt as though it had locked up. I could barely flex my wrist at all by this point. I was barely using my left hand at all anyway, just to avoid causing pain. Finally, I booked an appointment with the local poor man's clinic that I was registered at the time. I go in for my appointment, and after 20 minutes of waiting in the exam room, a doctor finally comes in. I explained to her my symptoms and for how long, telling her specifically that I physically cannot flex my wrist beyond a small degree, and that attempting to do so causes tremendous pain. I also told her of my failed previous treatment. Her response? "You're just babying it," she says. Then, without hesitation, and as if to prove her point, she grabs my left arm in one hand and my left hand in her other, and rapidly torqued my wrist in a few directions before I yanked my wrist out of her grasp. Cradling my wounded appendage and with tears streaming down my face, she looked at me with an "oh shit" expression and told me very hurriedly that she is going to prescribe to me a muscle relaxer and a stronger pain reliever. I left the clinic and headed to the nearby pharmacy to get my prescriptions. While I'm waiting for them to be filled, still very sore from her manhandling, I kept thinking over what had just happened. Why didn't she believe me at first? Why had she been so aggressive to prove that my symptoms were nothing? Then it occurred to me that she likely suspected me of simply making up my injury in order to score some painkillers. My instant reaction to her examination made her realize very quickly how wrong she was. Over the next few days, I took both medications. Despite the relief from the pain, they left me feeling violently ill. After 4 days, I stopped taking them completely. Yes, I 100% wanted painkillers for my alleged addiction. Surprisingly, this doctor called me 2 days after I had stopped taking the meds to follow up with me. I admitted to her that I had stopped and why. She then prescribed to me an anti-nausea medication and told me to resume the other meds. I did as I was told. The pain subsided, though not completely, and my wrist remained stiff. That is, until nearly 2 weeks later. With the pain no longer at the forefront of my mind, I just happened to flex my wrist a little bit. I felt and heard a loud snap in my wrist. It didn't hurt at all, but there was a definite change for the better. It was if 60% of the pressure in my wrist was suddenly gone and I had reclaimed some of my flexibility. I felt a great deal of emotional relief. A few days and a second snap later resulted in my complete recovery. Unfortunately, this experience has forever left me distrustful of the U.S. healthcare system. I am wary of the day that I will have to rely on it.
Open garage door may have saved us.
Edit. This was more than 5 years ago. I was 14 with my mom in a supermarket at about 3 p.m. We didn't realize what was going on until checkout, when the guy in front of us finished paying but then just stood on the far wall and stared us down. He was wearing sunglasses and about 6'2". He left right before we finished paying, but we had a lot of stuff to bag ourselves, so I guess he got impatient because as we were leaving, we ran into him in the entrance. We still didn't pay much attention until we got in the car, when my mom saw through the rear view that the guy had parked behind us and was still staring us down, still had his shades on. Not wanting to scare me yet, my mom pulled out of the lot and started home. Once we got off the main road a few minutes later, she slowly asked me, "Hey, is that car following us?" It most definitely was. He was trying to keep a distance, but clearly followed every right and left. We took, and our house is pretty deep in the residential area. Now, the smart thing would have been to drive to the police station, but my mom's an immigrant, and I wasn't old enough to really know. So instead, she just hit the gas on a longer road to try to lose him. We turned the corner onto our street, just as I saw his car speed around the corner onto the street we just left. Luckily, we had left our garage open that day, so we pulled in and I slammed the remote. The door closed, and through the window we saw the car speed past our house. I ran in and grabbed the landline, ready to dial 911 if he stopped. The car sped past our house again. Thankfully, he hadn't seen which house we had gone into. If we had closed the garage door when we left, it would have taken too much time and he would have spotted us. We would have been sitting ducks. For what? I can't say.
Getting caught by my professor. An awkward story.
All right, picture this. It's a late night at the university, and me and my boyfriend, a couple with more guts than brains, decide to sneak into an empty classroom for a little rendezvous. You know, typical college shenanigans. So there we are, getting cozy on the professor's desk, thinking we're in the clear. Then the door opens, and our professor walks in, looking like he's seen a ghost. It's that classic movie moment, the professor catching students in the act. But here's the kicker. Instead of flipping out, the professor just stands there, awkwardly mumbling about forgetting his notes. We were desperately trying to convince him it's not what it looks like, swearing we were just studying. Yeah, right. In the end, the professor gives us this deadpan, find a more appropriate place to study line and exits, leaving us in a mix of embarrassment and relief. And the best part? A story for the ages. College, right?
A quick story about my husband.
I just read a post about Father's Day, and it made me think of this. When my 38F daughter 5F was born, my husband, 33 went above and beyond with everything. I had a C-section, and it took me a while to recover. Our daughter was born a month before Father's Day, and we couldn't do anything fun on Father's Day since I was recovering. My husband was so amazing. I was essentially just changing and feeding our daughter and going to the bathroom. My husband was doing everything else while also giving me breaks and taking care of our daughter. Honestly, I felt a little useless. I could tell it was starting to wear on him, but he didn't show it. He always smiled and assured me he was okay. On Father's Day, every time our daughter started fussing, I'd try to get up to take care of her, but he kept getting up and telling me he would take care of her. I felt so terrible since he spent his first Father's Day taking care of our daughter and doing pretty much everything else while I sat around all day. The night of Father's Day, our daughter was asleep, and I apologized for not doing anything for him. I felt so bad that I was almost crying. My husband hugged me and assured me I didn't have to apologize. I remember exactly what he said. He said, "Honey, you don't have to be sorry. You're still recovering. You need all the rest you can get. I love you so much, and your health matters more than a day." My husband went back to work once I was fully recovered, and he was still so amazing with helping out with our daughter. Since my husband was working, I'd get up at night when our daughter needed us. And when he got home from work, he'd always take our daughter so I could get some sleep. 5 years later, he's still an amazing dad. Our daughter's a daddy's girl, and it's the cutest thing ever. Every now and then, I see posts like the one I read where the husband and wife aren't getting along after their baby is born, and I think about how much I love my husband and how lucky I am that he's been so amazing with our daughter. I hear about couples whose love fades after a while, and I feel so lucky because my husband and I are still madly in love after 13 years.
Thank you for watching Reddit Stories. Please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. May you have a blessed day.